My Bible is open to First Samuel chapter 8. That's going to be our text together this evening. First Samuel 8. We'll be there here in just a moment. It's good that we get to be together once again this evening to worship our God together is always wonderful. So it's so good to see everyone out that we can all be together to worship Him, to get into His Word with one another. As we get into First Samuel 8 this evening, the basic concept of the story, I think, is one that is well familiar to us as Israel comes to Samuel here in his days, and they desire a king so that they can be like all the nations. We're going to get into this chapter and into this story and work on making some application out of it together. So let's just go ahead and hop into the text and begin in verse 1 here. 1 Samuel 8 and verse 1. When Samuel became old, he made his sons judges over Israel. The name of his firstborn son was Joel, and the name of his second Abijah. They were judges in Beersheba. So as we work in this part of the text, talk about when Samuel was old, he does make his sons judges over Israel. Now, as we read that sentence, our minds might go, like my mind did, to our work on Sunday mornings as we're working through all of those judges, and we carry that up. We say Eli, Samuel, and then we don't see any mention of Samuel's sons as judges, although we just read here he is appointing his sons as judges in his old age. And so we say, well, why don't we have mention, as we talk about going through all of these judges, why don't we have mention in our material of Samuel's sons who became judges? Well, we just continue right on in the text where we read, Yet his sons did not walk in his ways, but turned aside after gain. They took bribes and perverted justice. Then all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah and said to him, Behold, you are old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Here's why we do not list the sons of Samuel among the judges. They were sure not about to be judges for very long at all. Samuel tries to appoint them as judges so that they can judge over Israel, but they are holy, wicked men who pervert justice, where a judge is supposed to put justice forth, where a judge is supposed to say, this is what is right and this is what we are going to do. Well, you come to one of Samuel's sons to judge your case and you say, here's a little bit of gold. Here's a little bit of silver for you. How about we lean the decision over to my side here? And so the elders of Israel, they come to Samuel and they say, your sons are wicked. They do not need to be our judge. And let's say something right here. They were right. You look at the conduct of these men, and they are absolutely right. Samuel's sons with this conduct should not have been judges. But let's say what should have come next. What should have come next is they're saying, your sons absolutely are not fit to be judges. Look at their wicked conduct. Won't you go to the Lord and tell us the right course of action? Won't you go to the Lord so that we can figure out what He would have us to do in this situation? Because your sons being judges is not righteous. It is not right, and we need to do something different. So what is the Lord's will for us in this matter? That's not what they do, though. They say, we have a solution. It says, here you are old. Here are your sons. They are wicked. But don't worry, Samuel. We have a plan. We're going to take care of this issue, the end of verse 5. Now appoint for us a king to judge us like all the nations. Here's the plan. Here is how we are going to remedy this issue. We will have a king. Appoint for us a king. Now, I want us to recognize the king itself was not the problem. In fact, you go back to the book of Deuteronomy, and God made provisions. God told them what to look for and what to expect in a king in Deuteronomy 17, beginning in verse 14. God told them about a king. Their desire for a king itself is not the problem. Here's the problem, the last part of what they ask for. Now appoint for us a king to judge us like all the nations. Here's what we want. We want to be like the people around us. We want to look like they look. We want to have a king like they have a king. And we're going to read later, and we'll make application when we get there later in this chapter. We want him to go out to battle for us just like their kings go out to battle for them. We want to be like all the nations. And so, Samuel, what are you going to do? Appoint for us a king to judge us. Well, Samuel's first response is, I am going to take this to God. I am going to go to him and see what he has to say on this matter, verse 6. But the thing displeased Samuel when they said, give us a king to judge us. And Samuel prayed to the Lord. Samuel's unhappy with this. And now the Lord's response is going to tell us a part of why Samuel is unhappy with this. A part of why Samuel is unhappy with this is Samuel himself feels dejected. He feels as if the people have this problem with him and have rejected him. And the Lord is going to assure him, don't worry, Samuel. That is not the problem here. They haven't rejected you. They have rejected me. We'll get there in just a moment. But part of Samuel's displeasure with this certainly has to be the recognition of Israel wanting to be like the people around them. He is displeased with this concept. He is displeased at what Israel wants here. And so he takes it to God in prayer. Then we do come in the text to God's answer, verse 7. And the Lord said to Samuel, obey the voice of the people in all that they say to you, for they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me from being king over them. According to all the deeds that they have done, from the day I brought them up out of Egypt, even to this day, forsaking me and serving other gods, so they are also doing to you. You listen to the people. They are acting in the way that they have always acted. Look at them historically and in their abandonment of me to serve idols. They're doing the very same thing now. Look at them now when instead of treating me as their ruler, instead of treating me as their king, they desire their own king so that they can look like the nations around them. They reject me as being their king to look like the nations around them. They have always acted in this way. So Samuel, don't worry. It's not a slight against you. They're not rejecting you. They are rejecting me. But you listen to their voice. However, don't just listen to them. Don't move forward with this without first warning them, without first telling them what is going to come. Verse 9. Now then, obey their voice. Only you shall solemnly warn them and show them the ways of the king who shall reign over them. Samuel, listen to them. Samuel, obey their voice. But before you do, you take this action. You warn them. You make it known the king of their choice, what that is going to be like when he rules over them. So let's look at Samuel's warning here. Let's stick to verse 10 for just a moment. Let's see if I can click the right button. Verse 10. So Samuel told all the words of the Lord to the people who were asking for a king from him. I don't want you to miss what that verse says. That's why we are pausing in this verse. So Samuel told the people all the words of the Lord. What are all the words of the Lord? Well, certainly as we go verses 11 through 18, the warning of what the king is going to be is part of all the words of the Lord. But as we just came off of what God just told Samuel, you see that his telling them all the words of the Lord has to include God telling Samuel, they aren't rejecting you, they are rejecting me. So what's part of what Samuel comes and tells the people? You are rejecting God. In this decision, it's the same decision as we're coming down near the end of this period of the Judges, the same decision of your fathers to forget God and go serve those idols. To forget God and go serve those idols. You are doing the same thing right here. You are rejecting God. Now let me offer you the warning that if you go forward with this decision, here is what the king that you have picked is going to be like. Verse 11, we'll go ahead and carry this down through verse 18. He said, these will be the ways of the king who will reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them to his chariots and to be his horsemen and to run before his chariots. And he will appoint for himself commanders of thousands and commanders of 50s, and some to plow his ground and to reap his harvest and to make his implements of war and the equipment of his chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. He will take the best of your fields and vineyards and olive orchards and give them to his servants. He will take the tenth of your grain and of your vineyards and give it to his officers and to his servants. He will take your male servants and female servants and the best of your young men and your donkeys and put them to his work. He will take the tenth of your flocks, and you shall be his slaves. And in that day you will cry out because of your king, whom you have chosen for yourselves, but the Lord will not answer you in that day. You see that language of verse 18? Your king. The one you picked is going to do all of these things. Your king will take your children as slaves and as workers for him. The king that you want is going to take your best fields for himself. He will take taxes from you and take a tenth of your grains, giving it to his officers and servants. He is going to take your best servants and best animals, and he is going to use them for himself and for his own purposes. He will enslave believe you. And ultimately, we come down to this point of under the king that you have picked, under the king that you want so badly right here. Here is the warning. It's going to come to the point you will cry out to me because of that king you've picked. And I'm not going to listen, the Lord says. I'm not going to answer you. Now listen to how powerful this message is. We've just come off of the reading of the Judges. As you walk through that story and the oppression of Israel, the affliction of Israel, and finally they come to the point they cry out to God, and God listens. And then you follow that cycle again, coming back to the point of affliction, and they finally cry out to God, and God listens. And here God warns them. God tells them, here is the choice you're making. Here is going to be the consequence of that choice. And if you make this decision, you are going to face the consequences. And when you cry out to me, I'm not going to answer. Here's the consequence. Here is the choice. What will you do? And so we come to the people's answer, verse 19. But the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel, and they said, no, but there shall be a king over us, that we also may be like all the nations, and that our king may judge us and go out before us and fight our battles. Yeah, Samuel, I don't care about any of that. What's going to happen is we want a king, because we want to be like all the nations. Even as they have a king to judge over them and to go out and battle before them, we want a king to judge over us, even with all of those consequences, and so that he can go out and battle before us. I want you once more to take your mind back to the book of Judges. And maybe even before that, to the book of Joshua, as they are going in and they are conquering the land. And we take our understanding of the conquering of Jericho, how that was conquered in such an unconventional way. Who in the world marches around a city and blows trumpets and shouts to make a wall fall down? No one, and were anyone else to try it, it's not going to happen. It happened because God went before them in battle, and those walls were knocked down, and Jericho was defeated. When they went up against Ai, they were defeated because God didn't go before them in battle because of their sin. But after that was taken care of, they utterly defeat Ai because God went before them in battle. They conquer Ai, they conquer Bethel. As we go through the history of our understanding of those Bible time periods, when they go down to the south and they conquer those kings, it's because God went before them in battle. As they go up north and conquer those kings, God went before them in battle. Coming to the book of the Judges, and they're in affliction. They're in hardship, and God raises up a deliverer, and he goes before them in battle. The number of times that the language is used that the Spirit of the Lord was upon one of the judges, and he goes before them in battle. And you come to this point where they spit in God's face. God has used the language to say they have rejected him. They spit in God's face and say, we want to be like the nations around us, to have a king who will go before us in battle. Never mind the consequences that God is warning us about there. We want a king to be like them. That's going to be better than this. So Samuel carries that to the ears of the Lord. Verse 21. And when Samuel had heard all the words of the people, he repeated them in the ears of the Lord. And the Lord said to Samuel, obey their voice and make them a king. Samuel then said to the men of Israel, go every man to his city. And the next chapter you find where Saul is chosen to be king. People say, we will take the consequences. God has warned them. We accept that. We want to be like the nations around us. So then, how do we take this story and make application to our lives? I think there are a bunch of applications that we can probably make out of this story and make rightfully without stretching the story. But there are a couple that I want us to make with great intention here. As Israel is planning their path, as Israel says, hey, we have a solution for this problem, they don't look at their solution and say, I tell you what, this is just going to be absolutely terrible. I know we have this solution here and it's not going to end very well, but this is the way that we're going to go. No, when they come up for this solution to their problem, I imagine they think things are going to end pretty good. This is going to make my life better. The things inside of my life is going to be better. Our having a king like all the nations, everything is going to get better. Now, we know from God's warning, and as you follow through Israel's history, that's just absolutely not true. But this is the first lesson, the first thing that I want us to think about. To be like all the nations is not going to be for our betterment. You know, we think if we can be just a little more like the world here, that's going to make my life better and things are just going to get so much easier. If I can be like the world and stretch things out just a little bit here, everything is just going to get wonderful. And the warning of God is, when you are like the nations around you and you take on their practices and how they live and how they act, it's not going to be for your betterment. It's not going to be for your good. It's going to be to your detriment. Here is the warning. If you make those choices, this is going to be the end. You conform to the way of the world, where here is the result of conforming to the way of the world. You take on this practice or that practice of the world, and God says, I know you think that's a good decision. I know you think that's going to end up really well for you. But let me tell you where it's really going to end. Let me tell you the outcome of your decision. And God says, as you conform to be like all the nations, it's not going to end in the good that we think it will, but it is going to be to our detriment. And secondly, I want us to see this. As God offers his warning to them, that is exactly what it is. He says, here is the warning. These are going to be the consequences of your actions if this is the choice that you make. What could God have done? He could have come in and slapped his hand down and said, absolutely not, and struck a lot of them dead if that's what God wanted to do. Says, you reject me, and so out with all of you. But it isn't what he did. What he said is, you have a choice to make. Know that in your choice, you are rejecting me. Know that in your choice, this is going to be the consequence of you taking these actions. So either you can do that, or you can keep me as your king. Hone in back on those words of verse 18. What did the people not do? They didn't obey. Because that's the thrust of Samuel's words in the warning. Be obedient, submit to God as your king. And they said, no, we want a king to be like all of the nations. What is God teaching us here? Tell you what, God says, I'll let you reject me. I will let you pick the king that you want to have in your life. I'm not going to slap my hand down and just compel you and force you to obey me. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. This will be the consequence of your action, and now it's your choice to make. You go all the way back to the very beginning, and that's always been how God has treated his people. Adam and Eve in the garden, and God says, you do not eat of the tree of knowledge and good and evil, because if you do, in the day that you eat of it, you will die. God says, if you make that poor choice, this is going to be the consequence of your action. Now, you have a choice to make. God has never forced obedience. God has never forced disobedience. He has said, here is the law. Here is what is for your good and for your life. And if you make the other choices, here is where that is going to end. That's brought out so well in this story for us, where God says to him, you can heed the voice and keep me as your king. You can heed the voice and have the king that I would have for you as that day is to come. But right now, you can have the king that you want and face these consequences. And boy, that's a choice we face every day. So we talk about idolatry. We can bring that same language into this conversation. Who is king in my life? Who is ruler in my life? We can have the prince of the power of the air as the king of our lives, that we would do whatever this world has us to do and be conformed to it. Going back to that first point, it's not going to end very well. And God tells us that. He warns us of that. Or we can have God's king, Jesus the Christ, as our king, as our leader, as the one who takes us into battle, as the one who gives us the victory. And man, this chapter teaches us that so very well. And so we will end this evening asking the question, who is your king? Are you king of your own life, or do you submit yourself to the rule and the authority of Jesus Christ, our Savior? If you are under your own rule, under your own power, won't you repent of that this evening? Won't you see the disastrous consequences? We can talk about some of those in this life, but ultimately, spiritually, to be king of our own lives is to end in eternal damnation, as we have rejected Jesus as king of our lives. If you're not submitting to him, which ends in salvation, won't you do that this evening? If there is anything at all that we can do to help you with that, won't you come while we stand and sing the song selected?